The air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and betrayal as Emily Harper stood frozen outside the polished oak door of her childhood home in suburban Atlanta. It was Thanksgiving 2024, and the Georgia night carried a crisp edge. But the chill outside was nothing compared to the frost waiting within. Emily had timed her arrival precisely, 38 minutes late. A calculated move to slip into the chaos of wine-soaked laughter and carb-heavy chatter. Hoping to fade into the background, she smoothed her navy coat, took a breath that tasted like regret, and pushed the door open. The warmth of the house hit her like a lie. And in that split second, she knew she'd miscalculated. The room didn't swallow her. It noticed her. Every head turned, just for a moment, before the smiles snapped back into place, tight, practiced, and empty. This wasn't her home anymore. The walls, once papered with her crayon scribbles, were now a sterile taupe, adorned with sleek frames showcasing her stepbrother Tyler's life, his graduation from Emory, a fishing trip in the Keys, a ribbon cutting for his fintech startup, Emily's past, her first bike, her high school debate trophies. Her mother's old Polaroids had been erased, replaced by a curated shrine to a family she no longer recognized. Her father, Richard, stood at the head of the dining room, his silver hair catching the chandelier's glow. Her stepmother, Vivian, glided toward her in stilettos that clicked like a countdown, arms outstretched. "There's our girl," Vivian cooed, her perfume sharp and expensive, her hug a fleeting performance. "We were just talking about you." Emily didn't believe her. She let the embrace happen, a quick pat that felt like a transaction, and scanned the room. Tyler, all charm and whiskey, held court near the fireplace, regaling two uncles and a neighbor with tales of his latest deal. He raised his glass toward Emily, a smirk curling his lips, as if she were a stranger he vaguely recalled from a bar. Her half-sister, Claire, leaned against the kitchen island, her laughter too bright, her presence too perfect, like she'd been born to fit here while Emily was an ill-fitting puzzle piece. The dining table was a masterpiece of excess, golden leaves, hand-calligraphed place cards, a pie bar that screamed hired decorator. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a brand launch. Emily moved toward her seat, catching fragments of conversation that had nothing to do with her. Someone's lake house purchase, Tyler's corner office, Richard's keynote at the local Rotary Club. No one asked about her law firm, her pro bono cases, or even how she was holding up. She hadn't expected them to. But the silence still stung. Then came the toast. Vivian stood, tapping her wine glass with a manicured nail, her smile a polished weapon. "Before we eat," she began, her voice dripping with rehearsed warmth, "I want to say how grateful I am for this family. It's been a tough year. But here we are, stronger, closer, more united than ever." Her eyes swept the table, lingering just long enough to make Emily's skin prickle. "Let's raise a glass to those who show up, who contribute, and yes, even to the ungrateful ones who grace us with their presence." The table erupted in laughter, sharp and slicing. Emily's ears burned, her pulse hammering. She didn't need to look around to know who Vivian meant. No one corrected her. No one paused. They sipped their wine, their eyes sliding past Emily like she was a ghost. Richard cleared his throat, redirecting the room to the spread: turkey, cornbread stuffing, cranberry relish, as if the jab hadn't landed. Emily stared at her plate, her fork untouched, her mind screaming one word: enough. The betrayal wasn't new, but it was raw. Years ago, Emily had discovered the college fund her late mother, Susan, had built for her. Money earned through double shifts at a diner was gone. An email from the bank, cold and clinical, revealed the truth. The account had been drained. The transfer authorized by Richard. When Emily confronted him, her voice shaking, he'd dismissed her. Tyler had a chance to make something of himself. He said, his tone flat, "You're resourceful. You'll figure it out." No apology, no remorse. Just the same shrug he'd given when she'd fallen off her bike at 8 and he'd told her to dust herself off. Vivian had been worse. Her pity a performance. "What's done is done. Sweetheart. Dwelling won't change a thing." Emily had taken out private loans, worked nights at a coffee shop, and clawed her way through law school at Georgia State. She'd kept the bank statements, the emails, the proof, not for vengeance, but to anchor herself against the gaslighting. She'd told herself it was a one-time sacrifice, a tough call for the family's sake. She'd been wrong. The dinner wore on, and the air grew heavier. Over dessert, Vivian, her tongue loosened by a third glass of Pinot, leaned toward no one in particular. Emily's probably off saving the world with her legal briefs and her cats. Right, dear? Tyler chimed in, his grin venomous. Changing lives, one strongly worded email at a time. A few polite chuckles rippled, but the room tensed, the awkwardness lingering just long enough to be felt. Then they moved on, as they always did, leaving Emily to swallow the barbs in silence. That was the Harper family way. They didn't stab you in the back. They did it to your face. Smiling. And if you flinched, you were the fragile one. Then came the moment that broke her. The lights dimmed, and Vivian, practically vibrating with glee, announced a special surprise. A projector flickered to life, casting a glow across the room. 40 years of Harper family memories. She trilled. Emily's breath caught as the screen filled with images. Richard in his Air Force uniform. Vivian pregnant with Claire. Tyler scoring a goal in high school soccer. Christmases with matching sweaters. Beach trips to Tybee Island. But not one photo of Emily. Not her first day of school. Not her prom. Not even the summer she'd spent teaching herself guitar on the back porch. A full decade of her life, gone. Like she'd never existed. In one fleeting frame, she spotted herself in a group shot. Blurred in the background. Unnamed. A prop in someone else's story. A cousin's kid at the table whispered, "Who's that lady?" Emily's hands clenched beneath her napkin. Her chest tight enough to crack. This wasn't neglect. It was erasure. Deliberate and surgical. She excused herself. Her steps steady despite the storm inside. In the guest bathroom, she locked the door and faced the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't sad or angry, she was awake. They didn't see her because they chose not to. Seeing her meant owning what they'd stolen. Her mother's legacy. Her place in the family. Her right to be remembered. She splashed water on her face. The cold grounding her. When she returned, the table was deep in pumpkin pie and small talk. No one asked where she'd been. She picked up her fork. Stared at the perfect slice. And tasted nothing. One thought looped in her mind. I'm not one of them anymore. Later, in the spare room they called an office, though no work ever happened there, Emily sat on the edge of a stiff couch. Still in her heels, her eyes fixed on the beige carpet. Her purse lay open beside her, her phone glowing with old wounds. She scrolled through emails from the bank, the ones she'd saved like evidence in a trial she hadn't yet dared to start. The college fund transfer, the dates, the signatures. She opened a cloud folder, password protected and untouched for years, and skimmed the files. Bank logs, notarized documents, screenshots of Tyler's startup website, launched weeks after her fund vanished. Her finger hovered over a contact, Aunt Lorraine, the only family member who'd ever treated her like she mattered. Emily typed a message, her hands steady. Can we talk tomorrow? She hit send, her heart pounding not with fear, but with something new, resolve. The next morning, Emily stood on Lorraine's porch in Decatur, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Lorraine opened the door before Emily could knock, her eyes steady, unsurprised. You came, she said, her voice a quiet anchor. The living room was a time capsule of what the Harpers had tried to bury, faded photos, dog-eared books, a framed note in Susan's looping handwriting. Lorraine didn't waste words. She crossed to a cedar chest by the bookshelf and pulled out a folder. I kept everything, she said, handing it over, because I knew you'd come for the truth one day. Inside were bank transfer receipts, dated 2 weeks before Tyler's company launch. Contracts with signatures that didn't match. Notes from Lorraine's talks with Richard, when he'd started rewriting the family story. And there, on yellowed paper, was Susan's will, clear as daylight. The college fund was for Emily's education. Untouchable. Emily's hands tightened around the folder, the room tilting just slightly. You never told me, she said, her voice low. Lorraine met her gaze. You weren't ready then, but now? Now I think you are. Emily didn't cry. She didn't rage. She felt something settle, like a stone dropping into still water. The truth wasn't a gift, it was a weapon. And she held it now. They hadn't forgotten her. They'd erased her, step by step, smile by smile. But Emily Harper wasn't invisible anymore. She was awake, and she was done staying silent. Emily Harper sat at her small oak desk in her Midtown Atlanta apartment. The city's skyline glittering through the window like a promise she was finally ready to claim. It was 3 days after the Thanksgiving that had shattered her illusions. And the silence in her home was no longer heavy, it was hers. Deliberate, a canvas for what came next. Her laptop screen glowed with a draft email, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Attached were 4 PDFs, bank statements with highlighted transfers. Her mother Susan's original will, screenshots of her stepbrother Tyler's fintech startup timeline, and a guest list for the family's memory video that had erased her existence. The subject line was simple, unadorned. You should see this. Her finger hovered over the send button, not out of hesitation, but to savor the weight of the moment. This wasn't just an email. It was a detonation. Emily had spent years swallowing the Harper family's betrayals, her college fund siphoned to bankroll Tyler's ambitions. Her presence scrubbed from their legacy. Her father Richard's dismissive sighs. Her stepmother Vivian's veiled barbs. Her half-sister Claire's complicit silence. But the video at Thanksgiving, the one that erased a decade of her life, had been the final cut. She wasn't just forgotten, she was deliberately erased. Now, armed with Aunt Lorraine's folder of damning evidence, bank logs, forged signatures, Susan's untouchable will, Emily was done playing the dutiful daughter. She hit send. The email winged its way to every living Harper relative. Every in-law who'd ever fake smiled through her pain. Every lawyer who'd helped bury the truth. Within minutes, her phone buzzed with notifications, cousins, aunts, a great-uncle she hadn't seen since she was 12. Is this real? Why didn't you say something sooner? I always had a feeling. She ignored them all. Their shock was too late. Their guilt irrelevant. But Emily wasn't stopping at an email. She'd already scheduled a meeting with her attorney, Rachel Coleman, a sharp-eyed woman who'd built her career dismantling trusts and exposing fraud. In Rachel's Buckhead office, surrounded by glass walls and legal pads, Emily laid out Lorraine's documents like a general spreading a battle map. Rachel flipped through the pages. Transfer receipts dated weeks before Tyler's company launch. Signatures that didn't match Richard's usual scrawl. Lorraine's notarized affidavit confirming Susan's will. This isn't a fight, Rachel said, tapping a page with her pen. This is a guillotine. Emily leaned back, her voice steady. Then let's make it sharp. By the end of the week, they'd drafted a formal complaint, misuse of trust funds, forgery of consent, breach of fiduciary duty. The names at the top read like a hit list: Richard Harper, Vivian Harper, Tyler Harper. Emily didn't want the money back, she wanted the truth public. On a rainy Tuesday, she walked into the Fulton County Clerk's office, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and filed the documents. By noon, they were public record, accessible to anyone with a Wi-Fi connection and a grudge. The real strike, though, came through a different channel. Emily had a contact, Sarah Nguyen, a journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who thrived on stories of betrayal wrapped in wealth and privilege. Over coffee at a quiet Decatur cafe, Emily handed Sarah a USB drive. Everything's there, she said, her voice calm but electric. Bank records, the will, and proof Tyler stole my work. Years ago, at her first job out of law school, Emily had drafted a pitch for a legal tech platform. Days before her presentation, the file vanished from her computer. And a rival firm, Tyler's, launched an identical product. She'd suspected sabotage but had no proof. Lorraine's folder changed that. Email headers. Screenshots. A log showing Tyler had accessed Emily's computer remotely during a helpful Wi-Fi setup over a holiday weekend. Sarah didn't blink. Send it all, she said. This is front page material. The next morning, the headline hit like a thunderclap. Fintech star accused of corporate theft. Family cover-up alleged. The article laid it bare: Tyler's startup, built on Emily's stolen ideas, funded by her mother's college fund. With Richard and Vivian's complicity, social media exploded. #Harper scandal trended on X by noon. Tyler's firm issued a frantic statement about reviewing allegations. But the damage was done. Clients pulled contracts. His LinkedIn vanished. And his Instagram went private. Richard's name was quietly removed from the board of a local veterans charity. A vague note about an ethics review tacked on. Vivian canceled her annual holiday gala, citing personal reasons. Emily didn't smile, but she felt the shift. The Harpers' carefully curated facade was cracking, and she'd barely raised her voice. The fallout was immediate. Richard called twice, his number flashing on Emily's phone like a warning. She let it go to voicemail. Vivian's response was predictably theatrical, a text that read, "You've humiliated us. I hope you're satisfied." Emily didn't reply. Tyler went dark. No calls, no texts. His usual swagger replaced by a coward's silence. Claire, though, reached out, her voice shaky on a late-night call. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said, the words brittle. Emily's laugh was sharp, cutting. "You knew how far it went for me. You just didn't care." Claire whispered, "I'm sorry, but it was too little. Too late." Emily hung up, her heart steady. Apologies couldn't undo years of complicity. The Harpers' final move came in a courier envelope slid under Emily's door. No knock, just the rustle of paper. Inside was a letter from Vivian's lawyer. All polished legalese. In the interest of family harmony, Ms. Emily Harper is invited to voluntarily step away from the Harper Trust and estate planning process. Such a gesture would reflect goodwill and understanding. Goodwill. The word made Emily's jaw tighten. They weren't asking her to leave, they were demanding she erase herself. Again, she printed the letter, pulled out a pen, and signed below the line. Then, in her precise handwriting, she added, "I don't want a dime from people who never wanted me." She slipped it into a plain envelope and dropped it in a courthouse mailbox. No return address, no fanfare. It wasn't surrender. It was liberation. Walking away didn't feel like loss. It felt like cutting a chain. Emily didn't want their money or their table. She wanted something they couldn't give. A family that saw her. So she built one. A week later, she hosted a dinner in her apartment. Nothing fancy. Roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, a bottle of Merlot she'd picked for its taste, not its label. Aunt Lorraine arrived early, her apple pie warm from the oven, her presence a quiet strength. Maya, an intern from Emily's firm, showed up with her girlfriend, their nervous laughter filling the room. Jake, a friend from her running group, brought sourdough and stories about his latest marathon. They sat around Emily's scratched kitchen table. No place cards, no power plays, just plates passed and voices overlapping. They talked about books, bad reality TV, the time Jake tripped mid-race and still finished. It was messy, real, and for the first time in years, Emily felt home. The next morning, she drove alone to Oakland Cemetery, a quiet sprawl of history on Atlanta's edge. Susan's grave was modest, a granite marker softened by time. Emily carried no flowers, just a letter she'd written the night before. She sat cross-legged on the grass, the November air cool against her skin, and read aloud, her voice steady. "I did it, Mom. I kept my spine. I kept your name clean. I'm not in their house anymore." The wind stirred the leaves, and Emily folded the letter, tucking it beneath a stone vase. Waited with the pebble. She didn't cry. She breathed, deep and free, and left. Back home, her phone buzzed with a voicemail from Vivian. Emily played it, just long enough to catch the venom. "You got what you wanted. We've lost everything." She deleted it mid-sentence. Vivian was wrong. This wasn't about destruction, it was about reclamation. Emily hadn't taken anything from them. She'd taken herself back. The Harpers thought she'd burned their house down, but she'd only lit a match to see her own path. And now, with the truth public and her chains cut, she was just getting started. Emily Harper stood by her apartment window, the Atlanta skyline a mosaic of lights against the December dusk. The Harper family's collapse was still trending, articles, X posts. Whispers in boardrooms, but Emily was done watching their unraveling. She'd reclaimed her story, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Family, she'd learned, isn't blood, it's respect. Safety, truth. The Harpers offered none, so she'd built her own with people who saw her. Lorraine's steady wisdom. Maya's fierce loyalty. Jake's easy laughter. Silence, Emily realized, doesn't keep peace, it festers wounds. Facing the truth, raw and brutal, had freed her. She'd carried their lies too long. But no more. To anyone listening, she offered this. Drop the burdens that aren't yours. Protect your peace. Walk away from tables not set for you. Share your story. Have you ever left a family to find yourself? Drop a 1 below or say where you're from. Join this community for more stories that spark truth and connection. Subscribe, and let's keep rewriting our own endings.